The golden light from the old chandelier cast long shadows across the dining room walls, whispering secrets no one wanted to hear. On the table, dinner was laid out with care. Creamy mushroom chicken, colorful vegetable rice, and in the center, a crystal bowl holding the dessert Shirley had poured her heart into vanilla pudding. Its gentle aroma drifted through the air, reminding her of the days when Robert, her blonde little boy, would wave his arms in excitement, waiting for his mother's sweet treat. 70-year-old Shirley Thompson sat down with a forced smile. Her frail hands trembled, yet every detail was perfect. Polished silver cutlery, crystal glasses inherited from her mother, the lace tablecloth she had embroidered by hand. Everything arranged like a ritual, not only to welcome her son, but to preserve a fragment of dignity after a lifetime of sacrifice. Robert sat on her left, restless. He looked at his phone more than he looked at her. His wrinkled shirt couldn't hide his exhaustion. His eyes avoided hers, carrying a secret too heavy to share. Across the table was Valerie, her 2-year-old daughter-in-law, draped in a tight red dress, her hair curled, her high heels glittering under the light. She smiled, but her eyes were sharp as blades. Valerie did not belong in this modest room. Her luxury was a cruel slap to Shirley's humble memories. Dinner began. The knife cut through the golden chicken, the sound echoing like steel in the tense silence. Shirley tried to lighten the mood with old stories. Valerie's lips curled. "Shirley, don't you think it's time to freshen this place up? My mom's house is so modern, minimalist, trendy. This feels old." Each word pierced Shirley's heart. She looked around the walls that had seen Robert's first scribbles, the wedding photo she had guarded for 40 years. To her, everything was memory. To Valerie, it was all old. Robert stayed silent. That silence cut deeper than Valerie's cruelty. Shirley swallowed hard, poured herself more wine, hoping the bitterness would mask her humiliation. But Valerie leaned back, delivering the blow Shirley would never forget. "You're not half the woman my mother is." The air froze. Shirley's spoon stopped mid-air. That sentence stabbed straight through her chest. Decades of work from dawn to midnight, sewing until her fingers bled, pawning her jewelry for tuition, it was all erased in one cruel remark. Robert lowered his head. "Valerie, please." His weak words were worse than silence. Shirley no longer saw the boy who once called her his hero. Before her was a man who let his wife trample his mother's dignity. A fire lit inside her of betrayal, of bitterness, and of strength she thought was gone. She set the spoon down, rose slowly, and said in a voice cold and calm, "Well then, Valerie, if your mother is so much better than me, maybe it's time she starts paying your rent." The words hit like a bomb. Robert's glass shattered to the floor, his face drained of color. "Rent? What rent?" Valerie froze, her smug smile gone, eyes wide with panic. Shirley met their gaze, her breath unsteady but her eyes fierce. She was no longer the meek mother. In that moment she was a woman who knew her worth. The silence was suffocating, broken only by the ticking clock like a gavel striking judgment. Robert trembled. Valerie clenched her jaw. But Shirley said nothing more. She sat down, hands neatly folded, knowing she had opened a door of truth, one that could never be shut again. Robert's voice cracked. "Mom, what are you talking about?" Valerie swallowed, trying to appear calm, but her hands shook beneath the table. The room waited for Shirley's reply. Her eyes glistened in the light as she whispered, "You really want to know? Fine, let's talk about how you've been living these past 6 months." The tension exploded, leading straight to the past Shirley had kept hidden. What had Shirley been doing for the past 6 months, and why will this truth change everything? The dim yellow light in the dining room seemed to freeze in place the moment Shirley spoke her challenge. No one moved, no one breathed. Robert stood frozen above the shards of glass at his feet, while Valerie stiffened in her chair, her shoulders taut as if to hide the trembling in her hands. Shirley leaned back, eyes steady, her breath calm in a way that felt almost unnatural. She inhaled slowly, as if finally able to breathe after carrying a secret that had suffocated her for half a year. "You want the truth?" Shirley's voice cut through the silence, even and sharp. "Then listen carefully. For the past 6 months, every cent of your rent has come from me." Robert's face drained of color, his lips trembling. Mom, what are you talking about? That's not… I told… You remember that day in February, don't you? Shirley pressed on, her palms flat against the table. You came to my house with tears in your eyes, telling me you'd lost your job, telling me you couldn't pay the rent. You begged me, said it would only be for a few months. Mom, just until I get back on my feet, you said. The memory slammed into Robert like a crashing wave. He sat stunned. Valerie blinked quickly, staring at him as if she were hearing this for the very first time. You made me promise not to tell Valerie, Shirley continued, her gaze narrowing on her son. You said you didn't want her to feel guilty, but it wasn't her pride you were protecting, Robert. It was your own fragile image as a provider. Robert's mouth opened, then closed again, too choked to speak. Valerie's hands dug into the wood of the table, her face paling. I drained the savings I spent my whole life building. Shirley's voice trembled but remained firm. The money I earned with needles and thread, stitch by stitch, night after night. I even sold my wedding set. Last week I sold your father's ring, Robert, the last piece I had of him, just so you and Valerie wouldn't end up on the street. The words hit like a thunderclap. Robert staggered back, eyes wide with disbelief. Valerie turned away, shame rippling across her face. Every month, on the 5th, Shirley pressed on, $1,000 from my account went to your landlord, $1,000. While I ate eggs and rice, while I cut back on arthritis medicine to stretch $1 further, and while I sacrificed, the two of you ate out, bought $400 shoes, and booked spa appointments. Valerie shot to her feet, her voice breaking. Shirley, I didn't know. Robert never told me. I swear I didn't know. A bitter laugh slipped from Shirley's lips. Of course you didn't know. He wanted you to keep thinking he was still the man who could provide for you. But don't mistake your ignorance for innocence, Valerie. You've sneered at me, compared me to your mother, belittled everything about me, all while living under the roof I paid for. Robert sank back into his chair, his head in his hands. Mom, I never meant for it to go this far. I thought I'd find work sooner, I thought. You thought. You thought, Shirley snapped. But you didn't act. You let me sell pieces of my life while you sat in silence. The room seemed to shrink around them, the ticking of the clock unbearably loud. Valerie slumped back into her chair, shaking. Robert's eyes burned red, his breath coming in short gasps. Shirley's own chest rose and fell quickly, but her words were steady now. I did it because I love you, Robert, because I couldn't stand watching my only son sink. But tonight, I see it clearly. My love has made you weak. My love has ruined you. And that ends here. Tomorrow I stop paying. Robert's head shot up, panic flashing in his eyes. Mom, you can't. Valerie and I will… If Valerie's mother is such a superior woman, Shirley cut in coldly, then let her handle it. I'm done. Valerie's face went pale, her bravado collapsing. Robert trembled, his lips moving soundlessly. Neither of them had expected this frail, 70-year-old woman to turn the table so completely with just her voice. The silence that followed was unbearable. Then, suddenly, the shrill ring of the landline split the air. The sound was harsh, urgent, cutting through the tension like a blade. Shirley's eyes flicked toward it, her heart stuttering when she saw the name glowing on the screen, Michael Jenkins. Robert frowned, confused. Who's… Michael Jenkins? Valerie wiped her tears, curiosity flickering in her wide eyes. The name hung in the air like an omen. Shirley hesitated, her hands trembling as she lifted the receiver. Her lips parted, her voice barely above a whisper. Hello? On the other end came a deep, steady voice. Shirley, it's been 40 years. Do you remember me? The room fell utterly still. Robert and Valerie stared, speechless. Shirley's heart pounded in her chest. Who was Michael Jenkins, and why had he chosen this moment, of all moments, to come back into her life? The name still echoed in Shirley's ears long after the call ended. Michael Jenkins. She had barely managed to exchange a few words before Robert's panicked voice cut in, demanding to know who he was. Valerie's sharp curiosity had quickly turned into open suspicion, but the seed had already been planted. For the first time in years, Shirley felt something inside her stir, something beyond duty and sacrifice. Now the dining room was silent again, but not with the same tension as before. This silence was heavier, more personal. Robert slumped into his chair, his face drained of color. Valerie's hands twisted the napkin in her lap into a tight knot, her nails digging into the fabric. Shirley sat opposite them, her shoulders straight, her gaze unwavering. "Mom?" Robert finally whispered, his voice hoarse. You've been paying our rent? With your savings?" Shirley's eyes softened, but her voice remained firm. "Yes, Robert, every dollar." "Well, you let her." She nodded toward Valerie. "Humiliate me under my own roof." Valerie shot back, her voice shrill, desperate. "Don't put this on me, Shirley. I didn't know. If Robert had told me—" "You would have what?" Shirley's tone cut like glass. "You would have suddenly found respect for me? You would have stopped sneering at my home, at my life, at who I am? No, Valerie. You've shown me exactly what you think of me." The words landed like blows. Robert buried his face in his hands, groaning as if the weight of his lies finally crushed him. Shirley leaned forward, her hands trembling but her voice gaining strength. "Do you know what hurts me the most, Robert? Not the money, not even selling your father's ring. What breaks me is watching you sit there in silence while your wife calls me mediocre. You, my son, the boy who once told me I was his hero. Where were you then?" Robert looked up, his eyes wet. "Mom, I didn't know what to say." "You didn't know what to say?" Shirley's voice cracked. "Love is not silence. Respect is not silence. If you love me, you defend me. You protect me. But you sat there and let her spit on me." The room felt suffocating. Valerie's lips pressed tight, her bravado shrinking with each word. Robert reached across the table, his hand shaking. "Mom, please, I swear I never wanted it like this. I thought I was protecting you from knowing how bad things were. I thought lying was easier." Shirley recoiled, pulling her hands into her lap. "Protecting me? You stripped me of dignity, Robert. You let me starve for your comfort. You let me sell memories for your lies." Robert's composure broke. His shoulders heaved as he sobbed openly, his voice fractured. "I've lost everything, Mom. The job, the respect. Now Valerie." Valerie snapped her head toward him, eyes blazing. "What about me? You lied to me too, Robert. You let me believe you were paying the bills while you were feeding off your mother's sacrifices. Do you have any idea how humiliated I feel right now?" "Humiliated?" Shirley repeated, her voice icy calm. "You feel humiliated?" "Valerie, I've been living humiliation every day for 6 months. You mocked my home, my life, my very existence, while sleeping under the roof I paid for. Tonight, you taste a fraction of what I have endured." Valerie paled, her chest rising and falling in shallow breaths. Robert turned to her, his voice breaking. "Valerie, please, don't walk away. I can fix this. I promise." But Valerie pushed back her chair violently, the screech of wood on tile slicing through the room. "Fix this? You can't fix this, Robert. You're a failure. And now everyone knows it." She stood, clutching her designer purse like a weapon, her eyes filled with venom. "If you think I'm going to live like some charity case under your mother's pity, you're wrong." "Valerie!" Robert lunged toward her, but she stepped back, glaring at both of them. "I married a man who pretended to be strong, who let me believe I was married to someone like my father. Instead, I got a coward who hides behind his mother's sacrifices. I'm done." Her words sliced Robert open, leaving him gasping. Shirley, though trembling, held her ground. She saw the cracks widening, not just in her son's marriage, but in the very foundation of lies that had held them together. "Go on, then," Shirley said quietly, her voice steady as stone. "Run to your perfect mother, Valerie. Let her house you. Let her dress you. Because tomorrow Robert and I will stand on our own, whether he's ready or not." Valerie's face twisted with fury. "You'll regret this, Shirley. You'll die alone in this old house, and your precious son will hate you for it." Shirley's eyes didn't flinch. "I'd rather die alone with dignity than live another day being disrespected." With that, Valerie stormed out, her heels striking the floor like gunshots, the front door slamming so hard the windows rattled. Silence fell once more, heavier than before. Robert crumpled into a chair, his sobs echoing in the empty house. Shirley watched him, her heart torn between pity and rage. She had defended herself, she had spoken the truth, but at what cost? She stood, slowly clearing the plates with trembling hands. Each clink of porcelain was sharp against the quiet. Robert's voice cracked behind her. "Mom, I don't deserve you. I don't deserve anything." Shirley turned, her face etched with lines of exhaustion and pain. "You're right. You don't deserve what I've done for you, but you're still my son. And tonight, you've learned the price of silence." Robert looked up, his tear-streaked face haunted. "Mom, I was fired 2 weeks ago. I didn't tell you because I was ashamed." The confession dropped like a boulder. Shirley froze, a plate slipping from her hand, shattering on the floor. 2 weeks, and you let me believe?" Her voice trembled, then hardened. "You let me be torn apart tonight while you sat there with nothing? No job, no plan, nothing?" Robert buried his face in his hands again, sobbing uncontrollably. Shirley stared at him, her chest heaving, her mind spinning. And then, almost cruelly, the phone rang again. That same name flashed on the screen, Michael Jenkins. Her heart stopped. Robert looked up through red-rimmed eyes, whispering hoarsely, "Who is he, Mom? Why is he calling you?" Shirley's hand hovered over the phone, her pulse racing. The choice loomed before her: pick it up and step into the past, or leave it ringing, and remain shackled to the life that had been crushing her. The shrill ring filled the room, louder and louder, until it was unbearable. And with it came the unspoken question that hung heavy in the air. Would this voice from her past be the key to her freedom, or the beginning of another betrayal? The phone's shrill ring still echoed in Shirley's chest long after it stopped. She hadn't answered it, not yet. Robert had collapsed at the table, his body slouched, face buried in his hands, and the weight of his words still rang in her ears. "I was fired 2 weeks ago." Valerie's absence left behind a hollow silence, broken only by the ticking clock on the wall. Shirley stood motionless, her hands trembling, as though every secret in the room had finally clawed its way into the light. Robert looked up at her, his eyes rimmed red, a boy trapped in the body of a grown man. "Mom, I didn't mean for this to happen. I didn't mean to drag you into all this. I didn't know how to tell you." Shirley's voice came low, steady, but sharp as a knife. "You had 2 weeks, Robert. 2 weeks of watching me worry. 2 weeks of listening to Valerie mock me. 2 weeks where you let me believe I was the problem. And still, you said nothing." He winced at every word. "I thought I could fix it. I thought maybe I'd get a new job fast, and you'd never have to know." "Never have to know?" Shirley's hand slammed against the table, the sound startling them both. "I sold your father's ring, Robert. I cut my medication in half, and you thought it was better for me not to know?" His shoulders sagged under the weight of her fury. For the first time that night, Shirley saw her son not as the man he tried to pretend to be, but as the frightened, broken boy she had never stopped rescuing. Her chest tightened. She wanted to rage, to scream, to make him feel the depth of her betrayal. But beneath the anger, something else stirred, something softer, something even more dangerous. Compassion. Robert's voice cracked. "Mom, I know I've failed. Valerie's gone. I've lost my job. I've lost your trust. I don't even know who I am anymore. But please, please don't give up on me." Shirley closed her eyes, inhaling deeply. She remembered nights spent sewing by dim light while Robert slept, the little boy clutching his stuffed bear, whispering, "You're my hero, Mom." She remembered the teenager she worked double shifts to keep in college. And now here he was, 35 years old, begging like that little boy again. Her voice shook when she finally spoke. "I'm not giving up on you, Robert, but I can't carry you anymore. Love doesn't mean saving you every time. It means letting you stand, even if you fall." And Robert's tears fell freely, dripping onto his hands. "I don't know how." "Then it's time you learned," Shirley said. Her words landed with the force of a verdict. The silence that followed was heavy, but in it, something shifted. Robert's sobs quieted, his breathing steadied. And Shirley, for the first time in years, felt the chains of obligation begin to loosen from around her heart. But then Robert whispered, almost too softly to hear, "Valerie's not coming back, is she?" Shirley met his gaze, unflinching. "No, and maybe that's the best thing that could happen to you." Robert nodded faintly, though his eyes betrayed fear. Fear of loneliness, fear of facing a life without her. Shirley knew the truth would hit him harder tomorrow, when the anger subsided and the reality set in. The night dragged on. Robert dozed off in the chair, his exhaustion finally overtaking him. Shirley quietly cleaned the table, stacking the silverware she had once polished for special occasions. She paused when she saw the shattered plate on the floor, fragments scattered like broken promises. Slowly, she bent down, gathering the pieces with careful hands, her reflection staring back at her in the jagged shards. When the house was finally quiet, Shirley walked to the phone. The missed call still glowed faintly on the screen. Michael Jenkins. Her heart skipped. 40 years had passed since she'd heard that name spoken aloud. She touched the receiver, her breath catching in her throat. Why now? Before she could stop herself, her hand trembled, dialing back. 1 ring, 2, 3. Then a familiar voice, deeper now but still warm, filled her ear. Shirley? Is that really you? She closed her eyes, and for the first time in years, she felt the corners of her lips curve into a smile not born of politeness, but of recognition. Yes, Michael, it's me. The conversation lasted only minutes. They spoke awkwardly at first, like two ghosts brushing against each other in the dark. But then the years fell away. They remembered the university library, the long walks by the river, the night he asked her to come with him to America. She had said no then, choosing safety, choosing the life that now lay in ruins around her. Michael's voice grew soft. I've thought about you, Shirley, more than I should admit, and I can't believe I found you again. Her heart pounded. She glanced toward the dining room where Robert slept slumped over the table, broken by his own lies. She thought of Valerie's cruel smile, of the humiliation still burning in her chest. And here, on the other end of the line, was a voice from a time when she had still been just a woman, not only a mother. When she hung up, her hands were shaking. Not from anger this time, but from something far more dangerous: hope. Shirley returned to the dining room and laid a blanket over Robert's shoulders. She lingered, brushing a stray lock of hair from his forehead. For all his failures, he was still her son. She whispered into the silence, You'll have to stand on your own now, Robert, and I'll have to learn how to live for me. The house finally grew quiet. Shirley climbed the stairs to her bedroom, her mind a whirl of anger, sorrow, and the faint spark of something new. She sat on the edge of her bed, staring at the phone still clutched in her hand. One thought circled again and again, Michael Jenkins. As she set the phone down, she noticed something she hadn't before, a voicemail notification blinking. Her breath caught. With trembling fingers, she pressed play. Michael's voice poured into the room, steady and filled with warmth. Shirley, it's me. I know it's late, but I had to call. I'd like to see you. Soon. There's something I need to tell you, something I should have said 40 years ago. Call me back. Her heart thundered in her chest. She replayed the words in her mind, each syllable heavy with meaning. Something he should have said 40 years ago. She stared out her bedroom window, the streetlights casting long shadows across the quiet street, and whispered to herself, what could he possibly have held on to for all these years? The question lingered in the dark, pulling her toward a truth she both longed for and feared. And for the first time in decades, Shirley knew her story was far from over. The morning after the stormy dinner felt strangely still. Sunlight spilled through the lace curtains of Shirley's small kitchen, touching the worn wooden counters and the old kettle that whistled gently on the stove. Robert had already left by the time she came downstairs, leaving only a scribbled note on the table. I'll figure something out. Please don't hate me. Shirley stared at the words for a long time, her heart aching, before folding the note neatly and tucking it into her apron pocket. But the message she couldn't ignore was the one waiting on her voicemail, the words Michael had left in the middle of the night. There's something I need to tell you. Something I should have said 40 years ago. The thought lingered all morning, pulling at her, whispering of unfinished business and unanswered questions. By noon, Shirley could no longer resist. With hands that trembled only slightly, she dialed his number. He answered on the first ring. Shirley, he said, his voice warm, gentle. I hoped you'd call. She swallowed hard. Michael, it's been a long time. 40 years, he said softly. Too long, But I meant what I said last night. I'd like to see you. In person. Can we meet? Her chest tightened. She thought of Robert's shame, of Valerie's venom, of the empty house echoing with humiliation. She thought of herself at 20, standing at the crossroads of life with Michael on one side and safety on the other. She had chosen safety then. Where had it brought her? Yes, she whispered, I'd like that. They agreed to meet in Columbus, at a small cafe not far from the university where they had first met. The cafe was bustling, but when Shirley stepped inside, it felt like time folded. At a corner table sat a man with white hair, his back straight, his suit simple but elegant. When he turned, his eyes, still the same clear hazel she remembered, lit up with recognition. Shirley, he said, rising quickly. Her breath caught. Age had etched lines into his face, but his smile was unchanged, warm and unguarded. Michael, she managed. He pulled out a chair for her, his hand brushing lightly against hers. Even after 4 decades, the touch sent a ripple through her. They sat, ordered coffee, and for a long while simply looked at each other, letting the silence bridge the years. You look exactly the same, he said at last. She laughed softly, shaking her head. That's kind, but we both know better. Maybe not the same, he corrected, but just as remarkable. Shirley felt heat rise in her cheeks. It had been so long since anyone had looked at her with that kind of admiration, with no expectation attached, no demand. They spoke of the years that had passed his move to Seattle, the engineering firm he built, the wife he had lost 2 years ago. He told her of his children, grown and thriving, each carrying a piece of him. She told him of Robert, of widowhood, of nights bent over fabric and thread until her eyes blurred. And then came the moment she had dreaded. Shirley, Michael said quietly, leaning forward, do you know why I left all those years ago? Her throat tightened. You wanted America, ambition, a future I wasn't brave enough to follow. That's part of it, he admitted. But the truth is, I asked you to come with me, and when you said no, I thought it was because you didn't love me enough. Her eyes stung. Michael, that's not true. I loved you, but I was afraid. My parents, my community, I thought they needed me. And then I met Charles. He offered stability. I told myself it was enough. Michael nodded, his jaw tense. I told myself to move on. I married a good woman. We had a good life. But I never stopped wondering, what if you had said yes? What if we had gone together? Her hands trembled around her cup. I've asked myself the same thing more times than I can count. The cafe's chatter faded. The clinking dishes blurred. For a moment it was just them, 2 people bound by what could have been. Michael reached across the table, covering her hand with his. I can't change the past, but I can tell you the truth now. I never stopped caring about you, and I don't want to waste whatever time we have left. Shirley's breath caught. She hadn't expected this. Not after all these years, not when her own life felt so broken. But here he was, offering something she thought she had lost forever possibility. Michael, she whispered, unsure of what to say. He smiled gently. Come to Seattle, just for a visit. Let me show you the life I built. Let me show you what could still be. Her heart pounded. A visit. A chance to see beyond the walls of this house, beyond Robert's dependence and Valerie's cruelty. A chance to reclaim the part of her she had buried long ago. I'll think about it, she said softly, though her heart was already leaning toward yes. That evening, back at home, Robert returned, his eyes weary but strangely resolute. He told her he had applied for jobs, any job he could find. He told her Valerie hadn't returned his calls. He told her he was scared. Shirley listened, but her mind kept drifting to Michael's voice, to the possibility of Seattle, to the thought of waves crashing on a coast she had never seen. After Robert went to bed, she sat alone at the kitchen table. The silence of the house pressed in on her. She pulled out her sewing basket, the threads and needles she had once used to piece together other people's lives, and she thought, maybe it was time to stitch something new for herself. Her phone buzzed, a message. Flight information for Columbus to Seattle, Friday, 3 p.m. Booked in your name. No pressure, just hope. Michael. Shirley's hand pressed to her mouth, her eyes filling. He had already bought the ticket. Resolution divided by transition. End of chapter 5. Shirley sat there in the dim light, the phone glowing on the table. a plane ticket, a new beginning. But in the back of her mind, a storm brewed. Robert's life was unraveling, and she had always been his safety net. Could she really leave him now? Could she choose herself for the first time in 70 years? And the question that refused to quiet: if she stepped onto that plane, would she be flying towards salvation or another heartbreak waiting in disguise? The rain had been falling all morning, soft but relentless, tapping against the windows of Shirley's old house like a reminder of everything she wanted to wash away. On the kitchen table sat the glowing screen of her phone, still showing the message Michael had sent. Flight booked, no pressure, just hope. She had read it a dozen times, each time feeling her heart pull toward it, and each time guilt whispering her back into silence. When Robert returned that afternoon, his clothes were damp from the drizzle, his face drawn but strangely focused. He dropped his jacket over a chair, sat down heavily, and rubbed his face with both hands. "I need to tell you something, Mom," he said, his voice rough. Shirley tensed, bracing herself for another excuse, another confession. "I went to a therapist," he said suddenly, surprising her. "At the community center, free sessions. I've been going every day this week." Her eyes widened. "A therapist?" Robert nodded, his expression half defensive, half pleading. "I had to, Mom. I couldn't keep pretending. She made me realize I've been addicted to being rescued. By you, by Valerie, by anyone willing to bail me out. Every time I hit bottom, someone pulled me up, and I got hooked on that relief. I never learned to stand on my own." The words cut Shirley to the core. They were like a mirror, reflecting back years of sacrifices that had created a dependency she had never intended. Her lips trembled. "Addicted to being rescued," she whispered. Robert pressed on. "It's not your fault. Not entirely. But you made it easy, Mom. Too easy. And I let myself stay a child." Shirley's chest ached. She wanted to protest, to argue, to remind him of all the love behind every sacrifice. But deep down, she knew the truth in his words. Robert's eyes brimmed with tears. "I don't want to be that man anymore. I got a job. It's not glamorous, it's night cleaning at an office downtown. Minimum wage, but it's mine. And I rented a room. Tiny, but it's mine too." Shirley blinked, stunned. You did all that?" He nodded. "I even signed up for an online course, accounting certification. I know it'll take time, but I want to prove to you and to myself that I can change." Her throat tightened. For so long she had begged for this moment, dreamed of seeing her son take responsibility. Now here it was, raw and trembling in front of her. But still, doubt lingered. She folded her hands together, steadying her voice. "Words are easy, Robert. Change takes time. Consistency. I've heard promises before." "I know," he admitted quickly. "That's why I'm not asking you to believe me now. Just watch me. Watch what I do." The silence between them was heavy but not hostile. Shirley studied him, the slump of his shoulders, the flicker of resolve in his eyes. For the first time in years, he wasn't begging. He was owning his failure. He reached into his pocket, pulled out a sealed envelope, and slid it across the table. "For you. Don't open it until you're on the plane." Her breath caught. "The plane?" He nodded. "Michael. Seattle. I heard the voicemail. I know you're thinking about going." Her pulse quickened. "You listened." "I didn't mean to, Mom. You left the phone on the counter, but I'm glad I did, because I saw your face when you heard his voice. You lit up. I haven't seen you light up like that in years." Her hand trembled on the envelope. "Robert?" He leaned forward, his voice breaking. "Don't stay because of me. Don't let me be your excuse. If you have a chance to be happy, take it. For once in your life, take it." Tears blurred Shirley's vision. She wanted to believe him, wanted to let the hope rise, but part of her feared that leaving meant abandoning him. "What if you fall again, Robert? What if you go back to your old ways?" "Then I'll fall, and this time I'll have to get back up myself." The conviction in his tone startled her. He had never spoken with such clarity before. For the first time, she believed just a little that he might actually mean it. The next days passed in a blur. Robert moved into his small rented room. He called Shirley each evening, not to ask for money, not to complain, but simply to share, about cleaning dusty cubicles, about applying for day jobs, about struggling but managing. Each call left Shirley torn between pride and guilt. Meanwhile, Michael's presence grew stronger in her life. Every night they spoke for hours. He sent her photos of his garden in Seattle, bursts of orange and yellow flowers, the deck with its sweeping view of the Pacific. He told her about his Friday dinners with friends, about books he loved, about how often he had thought of her. "You're more than a mother, Shirley," he told her once. "You're a woman with stories, with dreams. Don't let anyone make you forget that." The words soaked into her like rain on dry earth. For decades she had been Robert's mother, Charles's widow, the seamstress who patched up other people's lives. And now, someone was reminding her she could simply be Shirley. The night before the flight, Shirley sat in her room, suitcase open on the bed, dresses folded neatly, a new coral pink one she had bought just for this trip. The envelope Robert had given her rested on top. She hadn't opened it yet, though curiosity gnawed at her. Downstairs the phone rang. She hurried to answer, her heart racing when she saw the caller. ID, Michael Jenkins. "Are you ready?" he asked, his voice warm. Her throat tightened. "I think so. But part of me is terrified." He chuckled softly. "Good. That means it matters." They spoke until midnight, about everything and nothing. When she finally hung up, her heart was lighter than it had been in years. The next morning dawned clear. The rain washed away, the air crisp with promise. Robert arrived early to drive her to the airport. He held a small bouquet of daisies, her favorite. "You look beautiful, Mom," he said, his voice catching. She laughed, shaking her head. "At 70? At 70?" he said firmly. "And don't you forget it." At the airport, they walked slowly together, savoring the moments. When it was time to say goodbye, Robert hugged her tightly, whispering in her ear, "Have fun, fall in love, be happy. You deserve it." Tears stung her eyes as she clutched him back. "I'm proud of you, Robert. Keep proving yourself." On the plane, as it lifted off, Shirley's hands shook as she opened the envelope. Inside was a handwritten letter. "Mom, all my life, you've been my hero, and I never told you. You sacrificed everything, your youth, your dreams, even your health for me. I took it for granted, but I see it now. Thank you for loving me enough to finally let me grow up. Fly high, Mom, literally and figuratively. With love, Robert." Her tears fell freely, but they were tears of release. She pressed the letter to her chest, watching the clouds spread beneath the plane. For the first time in decades, the horizon felt infinite. Resolution, divided by transition. End of Chapter 6. When Shirley arrived in Seattle, she stepped into the arrivals hall with her heart racing. And then she saw him, Michael, waiting with a bouquet of yellow roses, his face breaking into a smile she remembered from half a lifetime ago. He looked older, but his eyes still held that same spark. As she walked toward him, she felt the weight of years falling away. But behind his smile, she noticed something flicker in his gaze, something unspoken, something almost urgent. He embraced her and whispered, "Shirley, there's something I need to tell you before we go any further." And in that moment, her heart froze. What truth had Michael been holding on to for 40 years, and was she ready to hear it now? The airport terminal buzzed with reunions and hurried goodbyes, but to Shirley it all fell into a blur. All she could see was Michael, his white hair, his straight posture, the bouquet of yellow roses trembling slightly in his hands. 40 years vanished in an instant. When he embraced her, she felt a strange mixture of comfort and unease. His warmth was real, but so was the urgency hidden in his eyes. "Shirley," he whispered, still holding her close, "there's something I need to tell you before we go any further." She pulled back slightly, searching his face. "What is it, Michael?" But before he could answer, a voice crackled over the loudspeaker, calling passengers from the next gate. The noise swallowed his words. He shook his head, forced a smile, and said only, "Let's get out of here first. We'll talk where it's quiet." The drive through Seattle was surreal. Shirley pressed her face to the car window, taking in the city's skyline, the sweep of water glinting beneath the clouds, the mountains rising like sentinels in the distance. Her heart ached with a mixture of awe and fear. This was a place she had never seen, a life she had never dared imagine. Michael glanced at her as he drove. "It's beautiful, isn't it?" "Yes," she whispered, "like a dream." but the way he gripped the steering wheel, tight and unyielding, told her that the dream was about to collide with something harder. They reached his home on a hill overlooking the bay. It was elegant but not ostentatious, a 2-story house framed by climbing roses, its porch wrapped around like welcoming arms. Michael opened the door and guided her inside. The scent of fresh bread lingered in the air, and books lined the shelves along every wall. "It hasn't changed much since my wife passed," he said softly. "I've kept it quiet." Shirley set down her suitcase, running her fingers along the spines of the books. "It feels alive," she said, "as though it's been waiting." Michael smiled faintly. "Perhaps it has." They sat at the kitchen table, a pot of coffee steaming between them. Shirley waited, heart pounding, for him to finally reveal what he had held back for 40 years. He cleared his throat, his hazel eyes meeting hers. "Shirley, when I left all those years ago, I asked you to come with me. You said no, and I told myself it was because you didn't love me enough. But that wasn't the whole story. There was something else, something I never told you." Her hands tightened on her cup. "What do you mean?" He hesitated, his voice trembling. "Before I left, I had a child, a daughter. I didn't know about her until after I arrived in America. Her mother never told me. By the time I found out, it was too late. She was already being raised without me, and for years I told myself I would reach out, but I never did. I buried myself in work, in family, in obligations. But she grew up here, in this very city. She's an adult now, and she doesn't know who I am." Shirley's breath caught. "A daughter, Michael?" He nodded, shame clouding his features. "Her name is Hannah. She's 40 now. Brilliant, strong, but she's carried anger all her life. She thinks her father abandoned her. And maybe, in a way, I did. That's what I've wanted to tell you. If we have any chance, if you and I, then you need to know the truth." The confession hung heavy between them. Shirley sat frozen, her heart thundering. For decades she had carried her own secrets, regrets about the life she had chosen, the dreams she had buried. And now Michael was placing his truth in her hands, a truth tangled with shame and unfinished responsibility. Her first instinct was to recoil, to shield herself from the weight of another broken story. But when she looked into his eyes, she saw not deception but vulnerability. "What do you want from me, Michael?" she asked quietly. "I want a chance to make things right," he said. "Not just with you, but with her. And maybe you could help me." Her chest tightened. She thought of Robert, of Valerie, of the humiliation she had endured. She thought of how her son had begun, at last, to stand on his own. Could she now step into someone else's family wound? Could she risk her heart again, at 70, when it was only just beginning to heal? That evening, Michael showed her the garden. The roses he had planted for his late wife glowed in the fading light. He spoke of the years of grief, the loneliness that had stretched long after her passing. "I never thought I'd see you again," he said, brushing a petal with his fingertip. "And yet here you are. Shirley, I don't want to lose this chance." She felt the sincerity in his words. And yet, the image of Hannah loomed, an unseen woman who carried her father's absence like a scar. "Have you ever tried to meet her?" Shirley asked. Michael shook his head. "Only once. Years ago. I saw her from a distance, but I didn't go closer. I was afraid." The honesty in his tone pierced Shirley. She recognized the fear of rejection, fear of truth, the same fear that had kept her tethered to Robert long after she should have let go. "Michael," she said softly, "you can't run forever. If you want me to be part of your life, then I need to see all of it, even the painful parts." He looked at her, eyes shimmering. "Then will you come with me? Tomorrow? To meet her?" Her stomach lurched. The idea terrified her, but something inside whispered that this was part of the reason fate had brought her here. "I'll come," she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. The next morning they drove into the heart of Seattle, the streets humming with life. Shirley's hands trembled in her lap as Michael guided the car to a quiet neighborhood lined with maples. They stopped outside a modest house with blue shutters and a garden brimming with wildflowers. "That's hers," Michael murmured. "Hannah's." Shirley studied the home, her chest tight. Through the window, she saw a woman about 40, her auburn hair tied back, her posture tense as she spoke on the phone. Even from here, Shirley could sense the steel in her movements, the echo of a life hardened by unanswered questions. Michael's hand clenched the steering wheel. "I don't know if I can do this." "Yes, you can," Shirley said firmly. "For her, and for you." They stepped out of the car. The walk to the door felt endless. Michael knocked, his hand trembling. Moments later, the door opened, and Hannah stood there, her eyes narrowing at the sight of two strangers. "Can I help you?" she asked coolly. Michael's voice faltered. "Hannah, it's me. Michael, your father." The silence that followed was thick, suffocating. Hannah's face drained of color, then flushed with rage. "My father?" she spat. "You don't get to show up after 40 years and say that word." Michael's shoulders sagged. I know I don't deserve it, but I had to come. I had to tell you the truth." Her eyes flicked to Shirley, sharp and suspicious. "And who are you? Another secret?" Shirley's throat tightened, but she held Hannah's gaze. "No, just someone who believes he deserves a chance to explain." Hannah's lips pressed into a thin line. For a moment, it seemed she would slam the door, but then, with a long breath, she stepped aside. 10 minutes, she said coldly. "That's all you get." Inside, the air was thick with tension. Hannah crossed her arms, standing as far from them as possible. Michael spoke haltingly, confessing his failures, his fear, his shame. Hannah listened in silence, her face unreadable, until finally she erupted. "You don't get to apologize and make it all better," she shouted. "You weren't there for the birthdays, the graduations, the nights I cried myself to sleep. My mom told me you didn't care, and she was right." Michael's eyes glistened. "She was wrong. I cared. I cared so much it terrified me, and I failed you by letting that fear control me. But I care still. I always will." For a flicker of a moment, something softened in Hannah's eyes, but it vanished quickly, replaced by steel. "You'll never be my father," she said flatly. "Not in the way that matters." Michael bowed his head. Shirley reached for his hand, grounding him. "Maybe not," Shirley said gently, "but maybe he can still be something, if you let him." Hannah's gaze hardened. "And why should I?" Shirley's voice trembled but held firm. "Because forgiveness isn't about him. It's about freeing yourself." The words lingered. Hannah turned away, her shoulders shaking. After a long silence, she whispered, "I need time." Then she walked into another room, leaving them alone. Michael's breath shuddered. "That's more than I deserve," he said softly. Shirley squeezed his hand. "It's a beginning." Resolution divided by transition. End of chapter 7. As they walked back to the car, the weight of Hannah's anger clung to them, but beneath it, Shirley sensed a crack, a small opening where light might one day enter. Michael was silent, his face pale, his hands trembling on the steering wheel as he started the car. "Thank you," he whispered, "for being with me." Shirley nodded, her heart torn between hope and dread. But as they drove away, she noticed a figure standing at the window of Hannah's house, Hannah herself, watching them leave, her face unreadable. And Shirley couldn't shake the question pressing at her heart. Had they planted the first seed of healing or awakened a storm that would tear them all apart? The drive back from Hannah's house was cloaked in silence. Rain had begun to fall again, heavier now, washing over the windshield in restless sheets. Shirley sat with her hands folded in her lap, staring at the blur of city lights streaming past. Beside her, Michael kept both hands on the wheel, his knuckles white, his jaw tight. She could feel the storm inside him, a lifetime of words too late, a daughter's fury still ringing in his ears. When they finally pulled into his driveway, the quiet of the hilltop house felt almost unbearable. Michael set the keys on the counter, his shoulders slumping under a weight that seemed impossible to lift. "I thought I was ready," he whispered, "but nothing can prepare you for the look in her eyes. It's like she didn't just hate me, she erased me." Shirley stepped closer, her voice soft but firm. "She didn't erase you. She let you in for 10 minutes. That's 10 minutes more than you gave her for 40 years. You can't expect her to forgive you in one afternoon." His eyes glistened as he turned to her. "I don't know if I deserve forgiveness." "Maybe not," Shirley admitted. But this isn't only about what you deserve, it's about whether you're strong enough to keep showing up, even if she slams the door 100 times. That's the only way she'll ever believe you. Michael looked away, his throat working. Shirley laid a hand on his arm, steadying him. You took the first step today. That matters. They moved to the living room, where the fire he had lit earlier still glowed faintly. The warmth seemed to soften the edges of their exhaustion. They sat side by side, not speaking for a long while, listening to the rain drum against the roof. Finally, Michael broke the silence. What about you, Shirley? You came all this way, stepped into a wound that wasn't yours. Why? She hesitated, searching for the truth within herself. Because I know what it means to bury your life for someone else, to love so hard you lose yourself. I thought maybe if I stood beside you, I could stop you from making the same mistake again. He turned to her, his gaze steady, his hand reaching for hers. And what about your own life? You've carried Robert for so long. What happens now? Shirley's eyes filled with tears. That's the question, isn't it? For the first time, he's trying to stand. He's cleaning offices at night, studying in the day, learning how to live without leaning on me. I should feel proud, but part of me feels like if I let go completely, I'll lose him forever. Michael's thumb brushed gently across her knuckles. You won't lose him. You'll finally meet him, the man he was always supposed to become. Her chest tightened. She wanted to believe it, to hold on to that vision of Robert not as a broken man, but as a son reborn. The fire crackled, shadows dancing across the walls. For the first time, Shirley allowed herself to lean into Michael, her head resting against his shoulder. He kissed the top of her hair, a tenderness that carried 4 decades of unfinished love. Stay, he murmured. Not just tonight. Stay here, with me. Her heart leapt, both with longing and fear. She thought of the roses in his garden, of the letter Robert had left her, of the anger in Hannah's eyes. Her life felt stretched between past and future, duty and desire. She pulled back slightly, her voice trembling. I can't decide yet. Not tonight. Michael nodded, though disappointment flickered across his features. I'll wait. I've waited 40 years. I can wait a little longer. The following days unfolded with quiet persistence. Shirley called Robert every evening. He told her about scrubbing office floors, about applying for accounting courses, about cooking his own dinners for the first time. His voice carried a steadiness she hadn't heard before. Meanwhile, Michael began writing letters to Hannah. Long, vulnerable letters filled with truths he had never spoken. Shirley watched him labor over each word, his handwriting shaky but determined. She admired his courage, even as she feared what rejection might do to him. One afternoon, as they walked along the Seattle waterfront, Michael stopped, turning to her with a question that caught her off guard. Do you regret coming here? Shirley looked out at the water, the gulls wheeling overhead, the air heavy with salt. No, she said softly. For the first time in years, I feel like I'm breathing air that belongs to me. He smiled faintly. Then maybe this isn't the end, Shirley. Maybe this is the beginning. On her last night in Seattle, Shirley stood on Michael's porch, watching the sun sink behind the mountains, painting the sky in bruised purples and fiery golds. Michael joined her, wrapping a shawl around her shoulders. Tomorrow, he said quietly, you'll fly back. To Robert, to Ohio, to your life. She nodded slowly. And you'll stay here, with Hannah, with your unfinished story. He studied her, his hazel eyes filled with questions he didn't dare voice. But maybe someday. She reached for his hand, holding it tightly. Maybe someday. The silence between them was thick with possibility. The next morning, Shirley boarded her flight, Robert's letter tucked safely in her bag, Michael's roses pressed between the pages of a book. She looked out the window as the plane lifted, her heart torn but strangely light. When she landed back home, Robert was waiting at the gate, his face tired but hopeful. He hugged her with a strength she hadn't felt from him in years. Mom, he said, his voice steady, I've been clean for 2 weeks. No drinking, no excuses. Just work. Just me. Pride swelled in her chest. She held him close, whispering, I believe in you, Robert. As they drove home, Shirley felt a quiet peace settle in her chest. She had seen what she needed to see. Michael's vulnerability, Hannah's fury, Robert's first steps toward independence. Life was still fractured, still uncertain, but something had shifted. That night, alone in her bedroom, Shirley unpacked her suitcase. At the bottom, she found another envelope she hadn't noticed before. It wasn't Robert's handwriting, nor Michael's. Inside was a single sheet of paper, typed in neat letters. "Shirley, you don't know me, but I know you. My name is Hannah. I found your number from one of my father's letters. I don't know why I'm writing, except I saw the way you looked at him, the way you stood beside him, and I need to know why. Why would you fight for a man who failed us both? Call me, or don't. But know that I'm asking not for him, but for myself." Shirley's hands shook as she held the letter. The room spun with questions. Resolution divided by transition. End of chapter 8. Shirley sat on the edge of her bed, the letter trembling in her hands, her heart racing with a mix of fear and hope. Outside, the night pressed close, silent and expectant. She whispered into the darkness, "What if Hannah doesn't want forgiveness but the truth?" And for the first time, Shirley realized her story was no longer just about love lost and found, or about a son finally learning to stand. It was about a daughter she had never known, a wound she had never imagined, and a question that would change everything. Was she ready to step into someone else's storm and risk losing the fragile peace she had only just begun to find? Shirley's story delivers profound lessons about love, sacrifice, and the journey of rediscovering oneself. It shows that unconditional motherly love is sacred, but without boundaries it can turn into chains, preventing children from growing into responsible adults. It reminds us that gratitude and respect are the true foundations of family, not empty words or silent complicity. The most powerful message lies in aging. Turning 70 is not an ending, but the beginning of a new chapter. Shirley dared to let go of dependency, to live for herself, and to find love and joy later in life. This is a reminder for everyone. It is never too late to start again, because every person at any age deserves happiness.